Hello, 2021. We are out of 2020. We are in a new year. And while we still have some challenges ahead of us, well, I think everybody will agree with me that we are glad to be done with 2020. When it comes to real estate, what are we looking at for 2021? I've been predicting for months now that buyer activity is going to pick up. And it's going to be a very busy spring or even first quarter of 2021 in New York City market. I have two articles, one from Zillow and one from Streeteasy that I want to show you that address the housing market. Now, the Zillow article is more about the national market, but it does address cities as well. Bold 2021 predictions, a stronger housing market across the board. So I do want to mention too, so I'm just going to read you through some of the headlines without getting too far into it. Home sales growth will be the biggest since the 80s. Zillow expects that the mark will be shattered next year, forecasting 21.9% annual growth for a total of almost 6.9 million homes sold. That would be the biggest annual sales growth since 1983. So that's a big deal. That's going to be a very big, very strong market. And that would be in keeping with what we've seen in the suburbs outside of New York City recently too. Demand for city living will surge in 2021. This is what I've been telling you. This is Zillow agrees. And they're focused on different cities, not just New York. Buyers will have a harder time affording homes, especially their first one. That is not true in New York. Addressing housing vulnerability will be a top priority as rent prices rise. Rent prices are rising maybe outside of New York, but inside of New York, that is not the case. Moving will be a digital first experience. That's an interesting one. Next home shopping season will be the hottest in recent memory. We talked about that, and could be the last of its kind. In this paragraph, they're saying that they're not seeing the typical seasonal trends for real estate home buying. And that has been true. It's been a very unusual year in many places because of COVID and because of the lockdowns that we saw. But I absolutely 100% expect that seasonal buying will be back in place by 2022, if not in 2021 as well. I did an earlier study on this, and even in as early as August in New York City, the seasonal trends were staying in place. They were just much lower than 2019. So schools and vacation times and all these things are going to stay in place. And so moves will happen at the same time. Shopping will happen at the same time. It's all going to come back into a similar cycle. Okay, next article this is the Streeteasy article. So 2021, New York City housing predictions, what New Yorkers should expect beyond next year, or expect next year and beyond. Okay, so this has some interesting stuff and all things that I think I agree with. So the New York City's economy will face a long recovery, pushing rents even lower. So it is true that we are still facing a long recovery in many ways. Rents are low. They continue to be low, down 20% in a lot of cases. And even more in other cases in Manhattan, but not necessarily in Brooklyn. So I think where you are where you're looking for rentals matters. 2021 will be a busy year for home shopping if sellers price accordingly. So this is, in keeping with what I've been talking about. This buyer activity is way up. Ask any agent and they will tell you the same thing. And not because we're trying to influence the market. It's just what's happening. There are a lot of smart buyers out there that are looking for deals, particularly in Manhattan, not necessarily in Brooklyn, which we'll talk about in a second. Fears of a lasting urban exodus will subside. People are, people like James Altucher were like saying that New York City is dead forever. And it's just not the case. And we're already seeing young people moving back to the city, taking advantage of low rents. And after a while, if you're want to socialize and you want to see people and date people and go to cool bars and clubs and theater, all that stuff exists here, and it will continue to exist here, even if it's not open right now. It will be in the next year or so. So fears of Streeteasy agrees. Fears of the urban exodus are not going to last. Now this, Brooklyn will become the default choice for New Yorkers who plan to stay. This is a very interesting point, and I think that there is a lot of evidence to suggest that this is correct. Brooklyn has been a super strong market for a long time. They're saying that as shoppers no longer have to worry about commute times, since the pandemic, buying in Brooklyn has led to an all-time high of 824 sales in October of 2020. Inventory is still high, so there's been a small price drop of 2.4%, they're saying, year over year in October. But people, when sellers are becoming more realistic and not trying to get pre-pandemic prices, there's a lot of business going on. And this is something I keep saying, and people don't believe me. And I have a bunch of trolls online. If you go on my YouTube channel, there's a bunch of trolls saying, you don't know what you're talking about. Of course you're saying this because you're a real estate agent. No, this is just what's happening. And these people are obviously not trying to buy in Brooklyn or Manhattan for that matter. They may not be buyers at all. So they don't know, or sellers. All right. So anyway, that's Manhattan's character will change as it welcomes a wider variety of incomes. Look, this is true. Like I just said, this is, what I've been seeing on the ground. I rented a bunch of places in the fall, and they were all about 20% lower rents. And there were a bunch of young people with different incomes and capacities and different occupations, and they all moved to the city in the last 3 months. 3 or 4 months. And it's a great time to be a renter in New York City. It's also a great time to be a buyer in Manhattan. And it continues to be a great time to be a seller in Brooklyn relatively to the rest of New York City. So that's it. This is I just want to point these out. If you go back, you can check. I'm on the record, on video record, as saying these things, months ago, over the past several months. And all the people with the data, all the companies with the data like Zillow and Streeteasy are agreeing with this stuff. And it's just because when you are in it on the ground every day, paying attention, looking at places, looking at data, this stuff is apparent. And it's not to say that we are out of the woods. We could have lockdowns coming still in New York City or and other parts of the country are entirely possible. We don't know entirely what the future holds, but I know that the demand is there. It's going to be busy. As long as the market is open, there's going to be a lot of activity in the first half of 2021. I hope this is helpful. If this in New York City real estate is all interesting to you, if you have questions or comments, I welcome them. Even if they're troll-like comments, feel free. I'm a Teflon, not the Teflon Don. I'm like the Teflon nerd. All right. Stay safe, stay distanced. Talk to you soon.